It started with a faint and distorted signal, a whisper through the vast emptiness of space. 8. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a glitch, a random noise lost in the cosmic sea. But when the signal was carefully analyzed, something astonishing came to light. The source, Zat-9, a distant star system far beyond the reach of Earth's current space missions. The message, though barely audible, carried an unmistakable phrase that sent chills through the experts at the United Earth government. UEG, help, humanity. The words were clear, but the rest of the transmission was incomprehensible, filled with strange symbols and broken data. To the galactic powers, the Elvirians, the Drachthians, and the Caraxis was little more than an ancient relic, a signal from a long-lost civilization, or perhaps a mistake. For centuries, they had dismissed Earth as a minor player in the galaxy, a small, insignificant world on the edge of known space. To them, this was just another forgotten message from a dying star system. But for Earth, the message was something else entirely. The UEG took the signal seriously, driven by a deep, unshakable belief that the message was not a mistake. Earth had always been underestimated by the rest of the galaxy, its technology considered primitive, and its space programs insignificant. For decades, humanity had been a quiet observer on the galactic fringe, barely acknowledged by the greater civilizations. Yet this message was a call to action, one that could not be ignored. The Council of Earth convened, and for the first time in history, Earth's top engineers, military leaders, scientists came together with one goal: to respond. Admiral Rowan Jacobs, a decorated hero of humanity's military, stood before a room filled with some of Earth's brightest minds. His weathered face revealed a quiet resolve as he listened to the experts discuss the implications of the message. "We don't know who or what sent this," Jacobs said, his voice steady, "but we know one thing: it's a plea for help. Humanity does not turn away from those in need. Not now, not ever." The weight of his words hung in the air. Jacobs was no stranger to difficult decisions, but this was different. This was a chance to prove to the galaxy that Earth was no longer a planet to be ignored. The UEG was determined to rise to the challenge. Plans were set into motion, and soon, Earth's finest engineers and military tacticians began working around the clock to build a fleet of unprecedented power. For years, Earth's military had been preparing for this moment in secret, developing new technologies and refining old ones. The fleet that would soon be assembled was more than just a show of force. It was a statement. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not helpless. As the fleet's construction progressed, anticipation grew. Earth's new warships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The designs were sleek, efficient, and devastatingly powerful. Built to withstand the harshest environments and carry out precision strikes with pinpoint accuracy. The flagship, Defiant, would lead the charge. It was a massive warship, bristling with advanced weaponry and equipped with the latest stealth technology, a testament to humanity's ingenuity and determination. Its crew was handpicked from the best of Earth's forces, led by Admiral Jacobs himself, who would take the helm in what could be the most important mission humanity had ever undertaken. In the command center, Jacobs stared at the holoscreen, watching as the last of the fleet's ships were completed. The Vanguard, as it was called, would soon be ready to depart. The Admiral felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness in his chest. He knew the odds. Zaytanine was far from home, and they would be heading into unknown territory, but humanity had never backed down from a challenge. In his mind, Earth's greatest strength was not its technology, but its will. Where others would retreat, Earth would push forward. The UEG knew the risks, but they also understood that the stakes could not be higher. The galaxy had long turned its back on Earth. This mission would show the stars that humanity was not just a fleeting dream in the void. It was a force to be reckoned with. As the fleet began its final preparations for launch, news of the mission spread like wildfire. The excitement was palpable, but so was the fear. Many wondered what they would find at Zat-9. Some feared the worst in alien race, too powerful for Earth to handle. Others believed it was nothing more than an elaborate hoax. But none of that mattered now. The message had been sent, and Earth's response was clear. Humanity would not let a call for help go unanswered. In the quiet moments before departure, Jacob stood on the observation deck of the Defiant, gazing out at the stars. He thought of Earth, its sprawling cities, its forests and oceans, the people who had come together to answer this call. He thought of the soldiers, the engineers, the scientists, all of them risking everything to protect the world they loved. And as the countdown to launch began, he felt a deep sense of pride. This was humanity's moment. We're not just a tiny, insignificant planet anymore. Earth was about to show the galaxy that when humanity was pushed to the edge, it didn't fall. It fought. And as the fleet's engines roared to life, carrying humanity into the unknown, Admiral Rowan Jacobs couldn't help but feel that the future of the galaxy had just changed forever. The moment had finally come. The newly formed fleet, the Vanguard, began its journey. As the massive ships lifted from Earth's orbit, there was no turning back. With towering carriers, sleek stealth warships, and battlecruisers equipped with the latest technology, the fleet was a symbol of humanity's strength. The stars stretched out before them, their cold light offering no comfort. It was a long road to Zatnine, and no one knew exactly what awaited them. Admiral Rowan Jacobs stood on the observation deck of the flagship Defiant, watching Earth's blue orb shrink in the distance. A quiet sense of awe filled him, mixed with the weight of the responsibility he carried. His crew was equally focused, but a few couldn't hide the nervousness in their eyes. The fleet was humanity's best hope, but the unknowns of deep space were enough to unsettle anyone. The journey had begun smoothly at first. The ships, designed for speed and stealth, moved swiftly through the stars, their engines humming in a perfect harmony. Each ship carried its own crew, each person aware of their role in the mission, whether as soldiers, engineers, or scientists. They were all bound by a common purpose: to answer a call for help. But as they ventured deeper into space, they began to encounter strange anomalies, ripples in the fabric of space itself. At first, the crew chalked it up to space debris or cosmic radiation, but then one anomaly proved to be far more dangerous than they could have imagined. It came without warning, an immense energy wave that shot through the fleet, sending shockwaves across their hulls. The Defiant was the first to feel the tremors, its sensors blaring in alarm. The fleet's systems flickered as the wave passed through, and several ships were thrown off course. The energy seemed to distort time and space, almost tearing their ships apart. For a terrifying moment, it seemed like the entire mission might end before it had truly begun. The massive Defiant shook violently, and for a few seconds, Admiral Jacobs was unsure if they would survive the wave. The energy pulse was so intense that it fried communication systems, throwing the fleet into chaos. Officers scrambled to restore order while Jacobs barked commands, trying to keep everything under control. But even as they regained some stability, they realized just how close they had come to disaster. This wasn't just a random event. The anomaly felt too deliberate, as if someone or something was watching them. Yet, despite the near destruction, the fleet continued its journey. Humanity's resilience was on full display. The Vanguard had been tested, but it stood firm, its mission unchanged. As the fleet resumed its course, the crew aboard the Defiant grew more determined. They could not afford to fail, not now, not after everything. Admiral Jacobs gathered his senior officers. In the war room, where new data from the signal was being analyzed, the message from Zatnine was beginning to make more sense. Distress call. It turned out, wasn't just a cry for help. It was a warning. The signal had mentioned something that seemed unthinkable at first: a race of alien creatures known as the Helgraths. The more Jacobs and his crew pieced together the fragmented data, the more they realized how dangerous the situation was.
Helgraths
were not just another alien species. They were a force of destruction, an ancient and aggressive race that had already wiped out entire civilizations across the galaxy. Aldari, who had sent the distress signal, were one of the last races to stand against the Helgraths, and even they were on the verge of extinction. The message was clear now. Earth wasn't just being asked to intervene, it was being thrust into a battle for the very survival of the galaxy. With each passing day, the stakes grew higher. The closer they got to Zat-9, the more Jacobs felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. What if they were too late? What if the Hellgrass had already destroyed everything, leaving nothing but ruins in their wake? What if humanity was ill-prepared for such an enemy? These thoughts churned in his mind, but he pushed them aside. The mission was too important. He couldn't allow fear to take over. The fleet continued forward, cutting through the vast expanse of space, the stars appearing as tiny points of light against the endless void. There was no turning back now. Every ship in the fleet knew what was at stake, and each crew member understood the risks. The unknowns were overwhelming, but their resolve was stronger than ever. In the quiet moments before the next shift, Jacob stood alone in his cabin, looking out at the stars. He knew that humanity had never faced anything like this before. Hellgrass were no ordinary enemy. Their sheer brutality and technological superiority could overwhelm even the most advanced fleets. But there was something about humanity that Jacobs believed in. Despite being a young species on the galactic stage, humans had a unique ability to adapt, to fight, and to overcome even the most impossible odds. If Earth's fleet was to succeed, it would have to rely not just on its advanced technology, but on its heart. Humanity had something that no other species in the galaxy possessed: a fierce, unyielding will to survive. And with that thought, Jacobs turned from the window. The fleet was on course, and they would see this mission through to the end, no matter what it cost. The Zeta-9 system loomed on the horizon now, and with every passing minute, the crew aboard. The Defiant prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most dangerous battle of their lives. Whatever lay ahead, humanity would face it together. The galaxy might have underestimated them before, but they were about to show the stars just what humans were capable of. As the Vanguard fleet neared the Zeta-9 system, an unsettling quiet filled the command center aboard the Defiant. The long journey had led them to the heart of a dying star system, and what they found there was nothing short of terrifying. The few remaining inhabitants of Zeta-9 were an ancient and wise species called the Eldari. Once a proud and powerful race, the Eldari had been engaged in a losing war with the Hellgrass for centuries. Their ships, beautiful and advanced, still carried the remnants of their former might. But the toll of war was evident in their every movement. The fleet was battered, their strength barely holding on, yet they welcomed the humans with cautious hope. Admiral Jacobs stood before the Eldari leader, a tall figure with shimmering skin that seemed to shimmer like the stars themselves. The Elder's voice was weary, but it carried the weight of centuries of struggle. "You must understand," the Eldari leader said, "the Hellgraths are not just a threat to us. They are a threat to all life in this galaxy. They are no longer content to conquer. They seek to erase entire civilizations from existence." As the conversation unfolded, the truth became painfully clear. The Hellgraths were close to achieving their ultimate goal: galactic conquest. Their forces, vast and savage, were overwhelming every species they encountered. The Eldari, with their advanced technology and superior weaponry, had fought valiantly, but they could not hold out forever. It wasn't just a battle of strength, but of endurance. The Hellgrath's numbers were too great, and their bloodthirsty tactics too brutal. The Eldari had developed weapons capable of decimating entire fleets. But the Hellgraths seemed to always find a way to adapt, to outlast. And now, the Eldari were preparing for their final stand. One last desperate attempt to protect their homeworld from the annihilation the Hellgraths promised. Admiral Jacobs felt the weight of the situation in his chest. This was no longer just about responding to a distress call. Earth had unknowingly walked into the heart of a galactic war that could mean the end of everything. The galaxy's fate was hanging by a thread, and humanity was now one of the few forces that could tip the balance. The details of the Hellgrath assault were chilling. With their brutal tactics, they had already destroyed much of the Eldari fleet, and were now closing in on their last stronghold, a fortress-like city built into the very surface of their home planet. The Eldari were outnumbered and outgunned. Their forces were scattered, and their technology, though advanced, was no match for the sheer ferocity and numbers of the Hellgraths. Jacob's heart sank as the reality hit home. If Earth did not act, quickly the Eldari would fall, and with them the last hope of stopping the Helgraths. Time was running out, but the Admiral had been trained for moments like this. He knew the odds. Humans might not have the vast resources or ancient technologies of other species, but they had something more valuable: adaptability. Earth's fleet, the Vanguard, though smaller in number, had a distinct advantage. Their ships were faster, more maneuverable, and designed for precision strikes. Unlike the bulky and slow ships of the Eldari, Earth's warships were built for speed, for hit-and-run tactics, and for outthinking the enemy, not just overpowering them. The human military had trained for years to survive in hostile environments, to adjust to any situation, and to outwit opponents with strategy. Jacobs knew that this might be their only chance to defeat the Helgraths. If they could find a way to use their superior tactics, they might be able to level the playing field as the Defiant moved into position. Jacobs gathered his senior officers to plan their next move. They needed to strike quickly, decisively, and with all the firepower they could muster. The stakes were high. The Eldari had shared everything they knew about the Helgrath's weaknesses, and the Admiral's mind raced as he considered the best way to exploit them. But there were still too many unknowns. How could they be sure that the Helgraths wouldn't anticipate their every move? What if their attack would only provoke a more devastating counteroffensive? Every possibility seemed to carry its own risks, but one thing was certain. If Earth did not act, the galaxy would be lost. The fate of billions rested on the decisions they made in the coming hours. Meanwhile, in the command center, the atmosphere was tense. Officers worked frantically at their consoles, relaying information from the other ships in the fleet as Jacobs and his team reviewed battle plans. The crew aboard the Defiant knew what was at stake. There was no room for failure. If the Helgraths succeeded in wiping out the Eldari, it would only be a matter of time before they set their sights on Earth. Humanity had no allies left. If Earth did not succeed, it could become the next target in an endless war of destruction. As the countdown began to launch the first strike against the Helgrath forces, Jacobs knew that Earth was about to fight for its place in the galaxy. But as much as they had prepared, the unknown loomed large. The Helgraths were unlike any enemy they had ever faced, relentless, cunning, and ruthless. But humanity had always risen to the challenge when it mattered most. The Vanguard would fight with everything it had, and if Earth had any hope of survival, they would have to do what humans did best: adapt, learn, and outfight their enemies in the silent void of space. The future of the galaxy hung in the balance, and Admiral Jacobs knew, without a doubt, that humanity's fight was only just beginning. The moment of truth had arrived. Above the scorched planet of Zat-9, the final battle began. The vast expanse of space turned into a deadly battlefield. As humanity's fleet, the Vanguard, faced the full wrath of the Helgraths. Their ships descended like a storm massive, brutal warships that seemed to blot out the stars with their overwhelming numbers. The sheer size of their armada was enough to send a chill down any commander's spine, and yet Admiral Rowan Jacobs stood firm. Earth's ships were smaller, faster, and less heavily armed than their Helgrath counterparts, but they were not without their advantages. Humanity had spent years refining their tactics, learning to adapt and outsmart enemies much stronger than themselves, and today those lessons would be put to the test. The first moments of battle were chaotic. Explosions filled the void as energy weapons from both sides collided, lighting up the dark expanse of space. The Defiant, alongside its sister ships, darted in and out of the battle, using speed and maneuverability to avoid the worst of the Helgrath fire. The Helgraths, with their overwhelming firepower, fought like a swarm of predators. But the human fleet was elusive, like a whisper in the storm. Admiral Jacobs, in the heart of the battle, guided his fleet with a calm focus. "We may be outgunned," he transmitted to his officers, "but we are not outmatched. Stay unpredictable, strike fast, and keep moving." It was guerrilla warfare in its purest form: hit and run. It's ambushes from unexpected angles, always keeping the Helgraths guessing, always forcing them to react. The human fleet seemed to disappear into the darkness of space and then reappear. When the Helgraths least expected it, the Eldari, once skeptical of Earth's intervention, now watched in awe as humanity's ingenuity unfolded before them. The human ships, smaller and more agile, were impossible to predict. The Eldari, who had once been masters of warfare, could not help but be impressed by the sheer brilliance of the human tactics. "They fight not just with weapons, but with their minds," one Eldari officer remarked. The Helgraths were brutal, but they were predictable. The humans, however, were an enigma unknown that the Helgraths could not easily crush. For every move they made, humanity made too, outwitting them at every turn. As the battle raged on, the tide seemed to turn in humanity's favor, but it was clear that they would need more than just speed and strategy to win this fight. The Helgrath forces were vast, and their tactics were savage. At that moment, Earth's deadliest weapon, a prototype starship known as the Aegis, entered the fray. The Aegis was a masterpiece of human engineering, an immense warship equipped with massive energy cannons and shields capable of withstanding even the heaviest fire. Its weapons were powerful enough to tear through the Helgrath lines like a hot knife through butter, and its impenetrable shields provided the protection the fleet so desperately needed. As the Aegis joined the battle, the Helgraths found themselves struggling to break through the human defenses. It was a turning point. Aegis cut through the Helgrath ships with terrifying efficiency, its weapons lighting up the sky like streaks of lightning. But the battle was far from over. The Helgraths still had their most dangerous weapon left, their mothership. The Reaper, a massive fortress of destruction that loomed ominously in the background. The Reaper was more than just a ship. It was a symbol of Helgrath power. It's massive. Cannons could destroy entire fleets in a single shot, and its armored hull was nearly impervious to most conventional weaponry. The Defiant and the Aegis fought valiantly to hold the Helgrath forces at bay. But Jacobs knew that they needed to target the Reaper if they had any hope of ending the battle. Time was running out. The Reaper was drawing closer to the Eldary's last stronghold, and if it wasn't stopped, the galaxy would be doomed. Admiral Jacobs took a deep breath, his mind racing through strategies, his heart beating faster with every passing moment. "We'll go for the heart," he said, his voice steady but full of resolve. "All ships, prepare for a full assault on the Reaper. We will take it down now or never." The fleet adjusted its course, every ship aligning for the final strike. As the Aegis and Defiant led the charge, Jacobs and his crew fought with everything they had, knowing this was the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. They attacked with a fury that only humans could muster, a mix of desperation and hope, a fierce will to survive. The final assault on the Reaper was a blur of energy blasts, shield collisions, and tactical brilliance. The Aegis fired its massive energy cannons, creating openings in the Helgrath defenses. The Defiant, always moving, darted in, striking where the enemy was weakest. The human fleet moved like a single organism, swift, precise, and relentless. Every ship, every crew member, every officer knew that the fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. As the final shots rang out, the Reaper shuddered, its massive hull cracking under the weight of humanity's firepower. Shields faltered, and with a final, deafening explosion, the Helgrath mothership was destroyed. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. Humanity had made its mark on the galaxy that day, showing that even against overwhelming odds, they could rise to the challenge. Admiral Jacobs stood on the bridge of the Defiant, looking out at the wreckage of the battlefield. The Eldari were saved for now, but the cost of victory had been high. Humanity had proven that it could face the galaxy's greatest threats and survive, but they all knew that this was only the beginning. The Helgraths had been defeated. But what other dangers lurked in the vast unknown of space? Humanity's fight for survival was far from over. And as the Vanguard fleet set course for home, Jacobs couldn't help but wonder what challenges lay ahead. The battle for the galaxy had just begun. The battle had raged for hours, each moment more intense than the last. The Helgrath forces were relentless, their warships flooding the skies like a tidal wave, threatening to crush the last remnants of resistance. But humanity's resolve was equally unyielding. Defiant and the remaining ships of the Vanguard fleet had taken heavy damage, their hulls scorched and battered from the unrelenting assault. Yet Admiral Jacobs and his crew pressed on, refusing to surrender. The Helgrath flagship, the Reaper, loomed in the distance, massive, terrifying, and more than just a ship. It was a living weapon, a symbol of Helgrath power. Its colossal form seemed almost alive, pulsating with an energy that made it seem unstoppable. The Defiant had already taken a beating just to get this close, but Jacobs knew that the fight was not over yet. This would be the final push, the moment where humanity either rose or fell. As the Defiant approached the behemoth, the bridge fell. Silent. The tension was palpable, each crew member feeling the weight of what was at stake. "Stay focused, everyone, Admiral." Jacobs's voice cut through the silence, steady and resolute. "This is our moment." The crew moved with practiced precision, each member knowing their role in the desperate final assault. The Defiant was already heavily damaged, but it still had enough power to deliver one last blow.
Helgrath.
The Helgrath flagship was not just a ship, it was a fortress, brimming with weapons and defenses. But the humans had one advantage. The Helgraths did not superior adaptability. The Defiant and its sister ships performed a high-speed maneuver, darting and weaving through the Helgrath fire, closing in on their target with deadly accuracy. The Helgrath's response was swift, launching counterattacks in an attempt to stop the humans in their tracks. The Defiant shuddered under the impact of a direct hit, its shields flaring, but it pushed forward, its weapons now locked on the Reaper. The battle was down to these two ships. One would emerge victorious, the other destroyed. The Defiant was almost within range when a squadron of human fighters, led by Captain Amelia Hayes, launched from the flagship's hangar. These small, fast ships were the true strength of humanity's. Fleet pilots who had been trained to fight in ways that no alien force had ever expected. With their superior speed and precision, the fighters infiltrated the Helgrath flagship's defenses, darting in and out of its massive turrets, hitting weak spots that even the Helgraths hadn't anticipated. It was an audacious move, but it paid off. Explosions rocked the outer hull of the Reaper as the human fighters planted charges along its critical points. The Helgraths scrambled to retaliate, but the fighters were already gone, their work done. The path was clear for the final strike. The Vanguard fleet, battered but unbowed, surrounded the Reaper, launching coordinated attacks from every angle. Every ship, no matter how damaged, did its part to breach the Helgrath fortress. Jacobs watched with unwavering focus as the Defiant fired its remaining weapons, each shot hammering into the flagship's core. The massive ship groaned, its shields collapsing under the barrage. Then, a deafening explosion that rocked the battlefield, the Reaper shattered. The once imposing flagship crumbled into debris, its mighty form finally falling to the relentless human assault. A wave of shock and relief rippled through the human fleet as the Helgrath forces faltered, their cohesion disintegrating in the wake of the destruction. The remaining Helgrath ships, seeing the fall of their flagship, broke ranks and fled, their morale shattered. The battle was won. The Helgrath fleet was no more, its once feared presence reduced to smoldering wreckage. Scattered across the stars, humanity had done it. The galaxy, once on the brink of annihilation, had a new champion. The Defiant and its fleet were battered, their hulls scarred from the brutal combat, but they stood victorious. The Eldari, who had once doubted Earth's ability to win this war, now looked to humanity with newfound respect. Admiral Jacobs, weary but resolute, stood at the command center, his heart heavy with the weight of the battle, but his spirit unbroken.